the hour, we're going to be dealing with emotional intelligence in the contact center, and delighted to welcome our two speakers today. Delighted to welcome today Sandra Thompson from Exceed All Expectations. So welcome, Sandra. And you've been studying, and I think you've been teaching emotional intelligence of late.
Yeah, it's true. So thanks for having me on, first of all. And I've been not only teaching it to undergraduate, which has been quite interesting, 18 and 19-year-olds going through that whole self-awareness bit, but I've been a student myself. So in the kind of Daniel Goleman faculty that have been created to get a kind of movement of people understanding what this thing really is. I've been doing it for about 18 months. And actually seeing quite a transformation in myself and how I see and view the world and how I have relationships with others now too. So excited to be here and to share a few bits and pieces that I've learned. Excellent.
And also delighted to welcome Neil Titcombe from Odigo. Welcome, Neil. People may not be incredibly familiar with Odigo as a name. The brand name, I think, is relatively recent.
It is. Yeah, it is. We were formerly known as Prosody. We're a part of a Capgemini group of companies. Yeah, we've been around a long time. Very much focused on providing enterprise solutions in the contact center customer experience arena. Our clients are far-reaching, typically enterprise clients using our technology at scale in all manner of customer experience situations. Excellent. So I'll talk a little bit about the company, but obviously its focus is on the topic.
Excellent. Well, if you're not already logged into our chat room, now is the time to do it. I think we've got about 56 of the 150 people online, so it really is very worth joining in. Here's the address. Go to your browser and type in cch.chat. It's a short code that will effectively divert you to this longer URL, callcenterhelper.com/chat. Very straightforward. Just type that into your browser. You can also type it into your mobile phone. It works an absolute treat on a mobile. So here's the address. Just type in cch.chat into the line of your browser, and you'll go through. There's a big advantage of being in there. You can carry on the discussion with the rest of the community. You can ask questions and so on. But most importantly, you can download the webinar slides through it. So you can see this link here. Download webinar slides. You can get both Sandra and Neil's presentation there, and access the reference materials, which is good. We're also going to be doing a quiz on emotional intelligence later. So here's the voting button. So you don't want to miss that. If you go to cch.chat, we've got a few people joined us. Angel's joined from Dayton in Maine. We've got Vicky from Carlisle, Katerina from Portugal, Kim from Huddersfield, Daniel from Northampton. So a range of different people joining us. So cch.chat. There is an added advantage. We have a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates or an Amazon gift voucher, depending on how we can get it to you. You choose for the best tip. So that would be great to send out. But we're going to start off with a little poll, and something has changed a little bit overall, and that is the question of what percentage of your advisors are currently working from home. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see this. Is it none? Is it between 1 and 24%? Is it 25 to 49%, 50 to 74%, or is it 100 up to 100% of your advisors are currently working from home? And I think this is going to be fascinating to see that. So if you'd just like to vote on that. I know I'm asking you to vote at the same time that I've just asked you to log into the chat room at the same time. So let's have a look at the responses here. And well, I think a lot of people have taken the government advice. Wow. 73% of the audience have got most of their advisors working from home. So Sandra, does that surprise you?
It doesn't actually. And from the few conversations that I've had with guys in contact centres, I've been hearing the tweeting birds and other bits and pieces in the background. I think that people are doing the best they can for the people who work for them, and where possible, they've made this happen. And I think it's outstanding that the guys that are able to continue delivering a service, but also being able to keep safe. You know, credit to you guys for making that happen.
Indeed. Well, that's absolutely amazing. So I wonder if you could go to our chat room and log in there, and I would be very fascinated to see what the experience of working from home is having on your outcomes, on your customer outcomes. So are you finding that agents are giving better or worse outcomes working from home, or is it much the same? So be interested to hear about what's happened to your outcomes. And just how are your team finding it? Are they finding it a shock? Are they crawling the walls? Are they lacking interaction? Or are they absolutely loving it? I guess some people would enjoy, some won't. So if you could just let us know in the chat room about what's been the impact of that working from home. I think it's going to be fascinating, and particularly the customer outcomes. How are the customers feeling after a conversation working from home? I think Imed has said sometimes we're finding the experience is impacted by connectivity issues, which I think is a problem. Lorraine is also saying we're experiencing connectivity issues, so perhaps the line quality causes problems. Nicholas said outcomes lowered initially with diverse change, but adaptation to goals and customer experience expectations, we've actually improved as a team. So I guess there's a sort of learning curve, Sandra, there. Daniel said we were lucky enough to have working from home capacities prior to COVID, and we have found that we achieve a similar level of performance. Nikki says it's a bit mixed, nice in some ways, getting to grips with technology for some. Diana said customers are asking representatives how are they doing and inquiring about their families. That's really lovely to hear that. It's not something that we normally get in a contact center. So that's probably a good time, Sandra, to jump across to your presentation now. And if you'd like to share us your thoughts on, just change the screen across to you. If we can, Sandra, if you could share your thoughts on emotional intelligence.
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, for those of you who may have missed it, I'm actually a student of Daniel Goleman and his faculty. And the reason why I say that is because whenever I hear anyone speak about these type of topics, I kind of think, have you got the badge? Have you actually got the badge? So I wanted to let you know that I'm nearly getting the badge. I'm in the process. I've been about 18 months in, haven't got it yet, but I have learned a lot. And I'd like to share some of those things with you. The other thing to quickly say is that I do lecture. I lecture at a business school in central London, and because of that, it's meant that I've included a couple of references in here if you want to go further. So in most cases, some of the slides have little book icons on them, which basically means if you like what you hear and you're quite interested in that particular thing, get the book or get the book from a library or download it, audio, whatever, because it might just give you a bit more insight. So here it is, emotional intelligence. And the conversation I'm having with a lot of people is these turbulent times. It's extraordinary how people are adapting, how people are choosing to take on a positive outlook, how people are coaching others through this stage. And actually it means that emotional intelligence isn't just good for business, it's good for your own kind of peace of mind. So I want to cover some of those things as part of this overall topic of emotional intelligence in the call center, because I think that not only have I learned that in fact it changes the relationships I have in my work, but it changes the relationships I have at home. So with that in mind, I'd like to cover 5 areas. Emotions, super fast, a bit of a rocket-fueled introduction to that. Many of you will know this stuff, but I think it's always handy to have a bit of a reminder as to what emotions really are. A little bit about emotional intelligence, and then moving into empathy, because I think that certainly in these times now, I'm seeing far more empathetic behavior, you know, the type of gratitude that we are displaying as human beings, the type of connectivity that we are creating with our neighbors. You know, I've never spoken to the neighbors here. All of a sudden we're having a cup of tea over the fence. What's all that about? So then moving on to some things around language, just a couple of bits and pieces I think might be helpful, some behavioral science in there, and a little bit about leadership. So this whole thing around emotions. So I think we know when we've had some emotions, most often when we reflect on something, and often we regret how we've shown up. Certainly when I started this learning experience with the Goldman guys, they talked about your choice to react or to respond. And I was thinking, well, that's all very interesting, but what exactly does that mean? So ultimately, what they were teaching us is you can sense in your body, if you're attuned to this, you can sense in your body when an emotion is rising. It happens so incredibly fast, but if you take a moment to actually consider what that emotion is, just for a moment, take a bit of a breath. Then you can decide whether or not you want to lose your cool, you want to show someone some deep understanding, or whether you want to be cross, or whatever you want to be, because emotions are a consequence of so many things. Lots of people think that there are just 6. That was something that was written down in the 60s. Now we know through things like MRI and lots of other types of research that emotions are as unique as your thumbprint. How you've grown up, the people who have influenced you, the actual situation at the time, your experiences, what you know, influence all of those things. And now when I show you this particular kind of cartoon illustration from a phenomenal book called The Chimp Paradox, what we've got going on here is actually a whole bunch of things going on in the brain. And many of you may know this. I'm actually also now a student of a neuroscience course, but I've only just started, so bear with me on that. But there's a woman called Lisa Feldman Barrett, she's a neuroscience scientist out in the States, talked about how your emotions don't control you. You can control your emotions. And what she's really talking about is this chimpanzee, this little chimp in the center of your brain in a place called the amygdala. And what she talks about, and what's talked about within this book, is the fact that the chimp basically says, right, there's an experience happening. Right, I'm going to check quickly with the computer. Have we had this before? Is this okay? And the computer can say, yeah, we've had it before. It's all okay. And then the chimp is like, okay, that's cool. Or the chimp says, have we had this before? And the computer goes, no. And then the chimp goes absolutely bananas, goes berserk. And what happens when the chimp goes berserk is that the kind of stick man that you can see there as an area called the prefrontal cortex just basically freezes. The connection between them freezes. So you can't think straight. So I don't know about you guys, but certainly when I lose my temper, or if I'm totally stressed, I can't think straight. And the amazing thing about emotional intelligence, about even breathing, is that you can calm that chimp down. You can actually manage your emotions. They don't happen to you, they are in your control. So that's the kind of thing I wanted just to cover off first off. It's a bit about emotions being completely unique to you. You don't know what's going to show up. And I think particularly in contact centers, while people may say, oh, this person's going to turn up, they're going to be really annoyed, you have no idea until you actually get into either written communication or speaking with them to look out for some of those nuances, whether or not when that person is speaking, they have a different tone, they have a different volume, the language they're using, some of the kind of sighing or other types of sounds they're making. So this guy, Daniel Goleman, Dr. Daniel Goleman, wrote a book in the late 90s, which basically said emotional intelligence is about your ability to recognize and understand emotion in yourself and others. You know, so when I started this course and they said, you know, it's all very important that you have a self-awareness. And I thought, I think I know who I am. But in fact, what they're talking about is really knowing how you respond and how you want to actually be with others. Because it's only when you really appreciate how you're triggered or where you find calm, that you can actually understand how others are feeling. So this thing around emotional intelligence is often called empathy. We'll come on to that in just a second. And I just wanted to share with you a model that was written, it was in the Harvard Business Review quite some time ago, this whole thing around emotional self-awareness. So some of you may have undertaken personality profiles. You might do 360s, where people tell you what they perceive you to be. And that's super, super helpful, because often that creates it kind of takes out the blind spots that we have about ourselves. But in fact, if we just take some time ourselves just to sit, just to breathe, just even to maybe write in a journal, even on your phone, making a few notes when you felt something either positive or negative, it helps you build up an understanding of how you're wired. So coming back to the earlier point I was making around the turbulent times we find ourselves in. So it's known scientifically that people with a high EQ, a high emotional intelligence, show all of these competencies. So they're easier to adapt. They can deal with conflict an awful lot easier. In some cases, they can actually avoid conflict from showing up. They're able to influence others. They have a better organizational awareness. So through the types of practices, and I'll cover a couple in a moment, the type of practices that I've been learning over the last 18 months, I think I'm getting to a point where I'm starting to show a few more of these types of skills. And I think the thing that the scientists talk about is that an IQ, so an intelligence level, can take you so far, particularly in your work, but it's the emotional intelligence that is found in people who are high performers. So coming on to this point of empathy, and this is one of my soapbox moments, so bear with me for a second. People talk about empathy, it's about being in somebody else's shoes. Well, in actual fact, there are three types, and there are three layers depending on what you are able to do. So cognitive is, yeah, I totally get how you're feeling. I can be on the same page as you. I can understand it cognitively in my brain. The second one is where I can feel it, where it's likely that you've been in a situation like that before, or you've met someone who's also been in a situation like that before. So you can actually feel it. It's not just in your mind. The third one is where the magic happens. Now, I've called people in call centers before now, and they've been able to say to me, yeah, I totally get how you're feeling. And I'm thinking, I'm not sure that you do, but it's okay, because I'm sure you can solve this problem. And then they'll say, yeah, I understand that's a bit of a problem, but I can't do anything to help you. Compassionate is where you understand, but then you're actually able to do something, to actually act on that feeling of empathy. And we'll come back in a moment to that point around being able to do the right thing towards the back end of this presentation. But I wanted just to say to you that there are three types. And organizations that enable people to show that compassionate side are those that are getting a better emotional connection with their customers. So moving on to language, this area is so incredible. And in actual fact, a lady I saw speak at a conference some years ago, a brilliant book called Talk that has a number of things within it. But I want to just focus on three particular areas here. The first thing I want to talk about is how to give bad news. Now, the interesting thing about bad news is that it presents a threat to our survival. It's as big as that. That's the reason why no one likes bad news, is because it's a threat to us succeeding, to us progressing. And that chimp in the middle of our brain kicks off because it doesn't know what it's going to do with this bad news that you've just given someone. Now, what the science says is not always comfortable for the person delivering the bad news, but it is more effective. And this is what they say. They say that giving bad news directly and sensitively, but without beating around the bush, is the way to do it. Now, I know for sure that earlier in my career, I would find a way to wrap it round and give a whole preamble, but in fact, direct is best. As long as you know the person that you're speaking to, you feel comfortable with the type of person that you're speaking to, and you're able to position it in a way that they understand. What the science says is that people are far more grateful for that than you making them work really hard to work out what you're saying. So I have a couple of recommendations here. I recommend that you come up with some scenarios. If you haven't done this already, you may have done this already, right? You come up with some scenarios where these types of things could be the bad news that you give people. You think about the types of words that you might use, the type of language that could be supportive, and maybe you role play that with a few people and you find out from them how it feels to deliver that type of language to them, to see whether or not actually that was a little bit too harsh, or in fact, I wasn't clear on what that meant. So understanding what it is you need to say and then role playing it so you feel comfortable and confident in that space. The final thing as well is just to check in that the individual understands clearly on what you've told them, because there's certainly something around calls coming back if it's not been clear. This point about reassuring is an interesting one, and in actual fact, a chap called Richard Chataway, who I met recently, who wrote a book, in fact, called Behavior Business, I believe, talked about some experiments that he had undertaken in a call center environment. And he was talking about how there's lots of initiatives he had brought about that were counterintuitive. So, for example, and I'm not sure how you're going to feel about this, but this is what I've learned, that when people are asked security questions and they're starting to mess it up, telling them, don't worry, take your time. That is hugely reassuring. And what they're finding is that people will get to the answer far faster than if they feel rushed. Knowing that they feel reassured, knowing that there's no pressure to actually get this done, means that they're finding the answers far faster. The other thing that I've experienced myself recently is when people say to me, it's going to be fine, I'm going to sort this for you. Or, do you know what? I know that this might seem really major, but it really isn't too big, because a lot of people call about this. So using social norms to say you're not the only person who's worried about this, that could work in some cases. And others, when they basically say, I've got your back, I'm here with you, we can work this out together, or I can take care of you. I mean, in these times now where people are fearful, they're really concerned, it can be just a calm, carefully created sentence that can just change the pace of the conversation. This final part then around how to silence your inner critic. I'm still working on my inner critic, I'd like to say. It gives me a battering every so often. But overall, this is about how you change your inner critic into your inner coach. Now, something that I've started doing within this household is to encourage people to think about what they're grateful for. So this is literally a case of, rather than being fearful about this and what might happen, what are you grateful for right now? It's a beautiful sunny day, we have a garden, blah, 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 blah. Now, the interesting thing about gratitude is that you can't feel fear at the same time as gratitude. So if your inner critic is giving yourselves a bit of a beating, be grateful for the skills that you have got. And also consider, if you would, maybe creating a journal, even if it's a few notes on your mobile phone of, in fact, I'm really brilliant at this. Or even if a customer says, thank you so much, bank that up and really challenge your inner critic to be thinking in a slightly different way.
And I found that works really well. Here's my book of gratitudes. I heard it on Women's Hour in January. So I've been sort of gradually trying to see, can I write down 20 things a day that I'm grateful for? And initially it takes quite a bit of doing. It might be nice just you know, admiring a nice flower in the garden, just, you know, something. And it does really help to frame your mind. We're going to jump into the middle of Sandra's presentation. We're going to just run a quick poll now, and because we're going to be coming on to leadership in a bit. And we're going to see about one of the things about leadership is motivation and empowerment. So we just want to ask a quick scale question. On a scale of 1 to 5, how employed are your advisors or your agents to make decisions for customers? Are they completely empowered? They can do whatever is needed to put it right for the customer. Are they somewhat empowered? Are they not very empowered? And we're looking more than just, you know, perhaps whether they can give a £20 discount. How empowered do you feel your customers are to do the right thing for? Sorry, your advisors are to do the right thing for the customer. So let's just have I think we've got most people voted here. If you've got any comments on that, if you just like to log into our chat room. That's at, just type in cch.chat into the browser. I think we've got about 80 people in the audience who are not logged into our chat room so far. So if you just like to type in cch.chat into your browser and go in there, let's just share the results while you're doing that. And here is the results. Only 5% of our audience say they're completely empowered. What's very encouraging is that 46% say they're very empowered to make the right decisions for customers, 32% somewhat empowered, and 14% a little empowered. So, Sandra, there's quite a spread there.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because I also, if we had more time, it would be fascinating to know how we define empowerment. Certainly with the kind of clients that I have, the people that I speak to, giving people the opportunity to make the decisions themselves, giving people the opportunity to do the best thing is such a spark of motivation. And actually that kind of takes me on to my last kind of section here, which is leadership. So emotional intelligence also is a very important skill for leaders, because ultimately how they show up for their team, how they show up for the people who they work to, can make or break a relationship, and can give people the opportunity to either do their best or actually just toe the line or feel despondent, and then you get people leaving. And I wanted to kind of leave you with the thoughts of an incredible guy, Daniel Pink. He talks about motivation as three key areas of focus. There's one part which is around mastery. So giving people the opportunity to be the best they can. So whether that's giving them the opportunity to learn new skills, whether that's learning a new topic and having new knowledge, but it means that people feel that they are invested in. They feel like they've actually been at the top of their game. The second thing is purpose. And certainly the thing that I understand, particularly from the students that I teach, that when times are tough, when they are feeling like the inner critic is battering them around the head, knowing that the purpose of what they're doing is greater than them. So in fact, they're solving people's problems. They're making people achieve X, Y, and Z, whatever the purpose is for your business. As a leader, taking time to remind people what their higher purpose is in their organization can be hugely influential. And then this final part really around autonomy, giving people the opportunity as far as you can to make their own decisions. No one likes to be told what to do. Fact. People like to have the opportunity to control their lives as much as they can within a framework. So that's the last kind of point on motivation. So really, this is one of my favorite photographs. This is me and Dr. Daniel Goleman. But just to say, to round up all of this stuff, you know, you have the ability to reframe a situation. You have the ability to choose to respond or to react. If you breathe, take your time, even 5 deep breaths can actually make things feel more positive. And do check me out on LinkedIn, and I've got plenty to say on the subject another day.
Wonderful. There's some great words of wisdom there, Sandra, some ones I like. We're going to be doing a quiz in a minute. So if you'd like to log into the chat room, that's where the quiz questions are. If you type in cch.chat or callcenterhelp.com/chat into your browsers. Sandra, I did love the fact that you can, your emotions aren't in charge of you. You can control your emotions. And a great example is if you feel the emotion is rising, just pause and take a breath, I think is a great one. When you're giving bad news, direct is best. Don't wrap it up. Just make it clear. Be direct. People have less to, you're not confusing the message there, and a lot of research. And that's not necessarily, that's a little counterintuitive for a lot of people who are told to sort of thought they need to skirt around it. And give advisors a sense of purpose. I think that's really nice. What they're doing is making a difference, and particularly in times like this, it's very easy to forget. If people are grumbling, anxious, what you're doing is making a difference. That's great. Okay, so we've got 133 people logged into the chat room, callcenterhelp.com hippocampus.com/chat. So we're going to start off with the first question, and that is, which part of the brain controls fear? Is it the frontal cortex? Is it the hippocampus? Is it the amygdala? Is it the cerebellum? So which part of the brain controls fear? And we'll just let you vote. I'm not sure if I spelled hippocampus right there. But I think the others are probably spelt right, but someone might be able to correct me on that. So we've got, what, 57 people voted so far. Just let you get the votes in there. callcenterhelper.com/chat. So I think we've got still going out. I'll just give you 3 more seconds. There we go. Right. So most of you got the right answer on that. Very good. It is the amygdala that is the part of the brain that controls fear. It's an almond-shaped set of nuclei in the temporal lobe of the brain, and it's dedicated to detecting the emotional salience of the stimuli. So, which of the following did Sandra in her presentation not say was a layer of empathy? Was it cognitive? Was it sensitive? Was it emotional? Or was it compassionate? So which one is a layer of empathy that Sandra did not have in her presentation? I'll count it down now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And most of you got that right. It is sensitive. 3 layers. Well done. I think, Sandra, the audience is listening. I thought, well, they've got the slides printed out in front of them. Sensitivity is important, but the 3 layers you talked about were cognitive, emotional, and compassionate. So we're getting some good scores in there. Okay, what percentage of Fortune 500 companies have set aside the budget to train emotional intelligence? Is it A, 30%, B, 50%, C, 70%, or D, 90%? What percentage of Fortune 500 companies have set aside a budget to train emotional intelligence? That would be a very good idea for a company to do this. And let's have a look at the results. Well, actually, most of you said 30%. So no, actually, according to a survey, 70% of companies have set aside a budget, and this comes from some research. Here we are, 70% set aside a budget. Quite interesting. 71% of hiring managers said that emotional intelligence is more important than IQ in terms of getting the right candidate. So very good one to train. So if your company is not training emotional intelligence, perhaps now is a good time to start doing that. And let's have a last question. Which of the following entrepreneurs was included in? Which of the following entrepreneurs was included in Huffington's Post top 10 list of emotionally intelligent CEOs? Is it A, Warren Buffett, B, Mark Zuckerberg, C, Elon Musk, or D, Bill Gates? So which one was not included in the top 10 list? I'd just like to put your results in there. I think this is causing you a bit more difficulty in choosing one there. So here we go. So we've got, I think we've got all the votes in there. And most of you have gone for Bill Gates. It wasn't Bill Gates, it was actually Warren Buffett. So that's perhaps a surprise for everyone. But Warren Buffett is a big believer in emotional intelligence, stating that success doesn't correlate with IQ. What you need is the temperament to control the urges that get other people into trouble. And Sandra, I think that ties in very well with your point about if you can sense when an emotion is rising, take a breath rather than get into trouble. Let's see who's won the voting. Well, it's Kim has topped there with a score of 40. So well done to Kim. So we'll be getting in touch with you and sending a prize through to you. So some absolute fascinating stuff. We're going to jump across to the chat room. Let me just get the chat room slides up on the screen now and see what's been coming in. I see things have been coming through thick and fast there. So we've had a question in from Stephanie, how do customer service representatives empathize with the customer in a call center? Face-to-face is easier than body language. How can they self-regulate themselves? They're not reacting negatively, but a positive attitude, particularly when a customer is frustrated or complaining, for example. Sandra, I know you mentioned pausing and taking a breath. Do you have any other tips for
So the actual point around empathizing is a really interesting one. What I found, particularly in my training and certainly in call centers that I know have had training on empathy, is sometimes to synthesize what the customer has said. So it's kind of boil it down and then play it back to somebody. It's a pretty simple technique, but you'd be surprised at how much people perceive that they're being listened to. And that does create a kind of empathy, because at least then they feel like they're being heard. I've felt the frustration of speaking to people on call centers where they've had to follow a script. I've said something pretty dramatic and it's totally gone. And I've just thought, you know what, you have no idea what this is about. The other point to say is around face-to-face is very helpful because you can see body language, but don't underestimate the value of the voice, how it's emphasized, where there are spaces, the language that's used. I think you can pick up so much in that space, but it does mean really focusing on the listening that you can do. And that can be quite exhausting if you're really, really on it. And this point around self-regulation, breathing is totally on it. Just even counting a couple of points, 1, 2, just to decide how you want to show up. And again, on this point around positive attitude, remembering your purpose is to do X. And if you're able to, actually, there's a particular technique. I just want to find something in my notes because I just quickly want to cover it, is to wish someone well. It sounds airy-fairy, right? But to actually wish someone well, you'd be surprised at how calming that can be, because you've got no idea in many cases what they're actually dealing with. It could be complete chaos. It could be all sorts of stuff going on behind that telephone call. So just to wish them well could be something that helps.
Excellent. Well, we've also had a tip in from Daniel. Neil, I think this is a nice one. And the tip is empower your people to help solve challenges when working from home. Most of ideas for keeping people motivated and engaged in what is unprecedented times have come from our frontline observers. Things such as virtual break rooms, well-being meets, which I guess is virtual yoga, workout classes. You know, it does seem there's a sort of technological angle to this.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, clearly the big difference when anybody's working from home is that camaraderie of the team spirit you would inevitably get in a traditional contact center. So to try to supplement that through the spirit of connectivity and giving a little bit more tolerance to innovation and how people might interact through video as we are now, and quizzes and breaks and virtual drinks and things like that. I've certainly been adopting that within my own team to break up the monotony and you know, and foster a spirit that we're still one team. We just aren't actually sat next to each other anymore. So I think technology has a real role to play in that, and some of it's pretty straightforward to do, of course.
Indeed. So we've also got a question in here from Anuj, who says, what do you think emotions will play a part on uncertain controllable factors, like, for instance, logistics not working, which is, you know, it comes into the contact centers, you know, a parcel hasn't been delivered, the customer's not very happy. It's obviously not the fault of the contact center agent. How do you think emotions can play into that, Sandra?
It's quite a big question. I'm going to give some quick fire answers. There's the emotion that the emotion of the call center agent, which is responsibility, accountability, guilt. Sometimes even if it isn't their fault, they still feel guilty. And actually, you can only control what you can influence. So if you can't influence that, listen and try and do whatever you can, which is best, but actually taking full responsibility for it is not appropriate. And as we've said before, when someone comes onto the phone ranting and raving, playing back what the issue is and being very calm in your voice can actually bring the situation it can take the heat out of the situation.
Excellent. Well, it's probably a good time now to jump across to Neil. And Neil's going to talk about meeting the emotional needs of consumers and agents. So Neil, do you want to take us through your thoughts?
Thank you, Jonty, and thank you, Sandra. Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be here from sunny Southern Ireland, sat in my office where I've been in for the last 6 weeks, so it's good to talk to a nice group of people. Yeah, yes, indeed. I'd like to sort of turn our attention to specifically how this very fascinating topic of emotional intelligence applies to the industry we all know and love so well in the contact center. As I mentioned before, Odago is a business focused on innovation and technology, and throughout my 23 or something years now, I've lost count to a degree of working in the contact center space for different technology vendors. I've always been certainly passionate about applying technology for the appropriate use and not upgrading or changing technology just for the sake of it as such. And I think in the world we're in today, which is so real time and so connected, that's never been more relevant and appropriate. And the change in consumer expectation is now sort of driving that to almost a tipping point where customers and our clients certainly and contact centers and businesses need to be much more aware of that. And there's a huge opportunity to embrace that. So if I start by just looking at a bit of a timeline of innovation, I'm a self-professed technology geek. I always have had really since school, had a general passion in technology and change. And depending how old you are, you'll make a conscious connection to different milestones in innovation and history over the last sort of century, really. And as I mentioned today, we're very much sort of starting to get familiar with the concept of artificial intelligence and the notion of being always connected, everything being available online in real time 24/7. And that's, as I say, changing consumer expectation depending upon your age and situation, and certainly changing the way that brands have to integrate and connect with indeed their customers. I thought this was an interesting sort of perspective on where we are in that timeline. The Singularity Timeline is a theory that's been published by a company called the Emerge Group. They're an AI research and advisory board based in the US. And about a year ago, they did a very detailed study where they actually interviewed, I think, 32 different PhD professors, gauging their opinion on exactly when we'll get to this singularity point. And the singularity point is where the machine power will surpass brain power of a single human and ultimately surpass the brain power of all humans. And one thing they sort of were fairly unanimous on is we're a long way away from that. Potentially, the research concluded somewhere around 2045, where we get to the point where we could see that really become anywhere close to a possibility. Today we're at the point now where the Google supercomputer, could certainly surpass the brain power of a mouse, and the quantum computer that Google have now created. They profess to be able to do what a supercomputer could do in 10,000 years in 200 seconds. So there's no question we're getting to the point now where technology is getting to a much more powerful position to start to apply intelligence that can be supplemented into a customer engagement and play a real part in how we talk to each other and brands. And it's unarguable that we are a group of individuals that obviously are unique, depending on our gender, our demographic, our location, our race, our specific connection to a brand. Then there's a whole unlimited number of situations and scenarios that we in turn expect in terms of the customer service that we would potentially invite and expect from our service providers, for example. If I look at the demographic makeup of potential customers that we all have today, my mother will hate me for this, but on the left-hand side is my wonderful mum, who's just a baby boomer at 74 years old. I have been able to indoctrinate some technology on her. She's now a Facebook member. She has a Netflix account, but for her, it doesn't change her life. She doesn't use it regularly, but she wants to understand where the value is. And for her, Facebook is understanding what I might be doing, and Netflix, for the few times she's used it, gives her a bit more of a choice to watch some old TV shows, etc. But she's certainly not going to be somebody that's relying on that or expectant of it. You know, Generation X, who, you know, I would fall into. We were the first to obviously assimilate the web and start to use personal computing in anger. I will adopt new channels readily, but I will rarely mix social channels with business use. So I won't have typically customers on my Facebook account. I'll clearly use LinkedIn for that. Millennials, on the other hand, you know, they've grown up with technology, arguably the first internet generation. They're very resourceful. They will drive change. They'll look to be disruptive, and they will embrace and merge their business and personal lives in the digital community. And then we, of course, have the Generation Z, which my son would fall into. Again, he'll thank me for that picture. He's 19 years old. He only knows technology. He's consumed in the digital world. He'll refer to his user groups on Snapchat and other forums for advice more than before he'll ask me. And frankly, he takes it all for granted. It's a given that technology is there first and foremost, and he would be looking to interact using a digital channel over any voice channel if and wherever possible. And then coming right in behind that is my daughter, who's 10. She's a Generation Alpha, born from 2010. She's starting to evolve into an AI-driven world. She's very familiar and comfortable with automation. She'll happily integrate with it with a bot where it's appropriate. She's on TikTok all the time, copying and repeating and assimilating her achievements with a user group. And her aspirations always to, can I have a phone like yours, Dad? She's always trying to step up. And obviously this group will be coming into the workforce in just 8 years' time. And if you didn't already know, you know, the contact center market in the UK already is dominated by this millennial and Generation X workforce. More than 75%, in fact, of all agents fall into that category. So I'm going to pause there because I know Jonty wants to do a poll. So Jonty, you might want to pose the question.
Okay, so the question is, in the contact center, how do you use demographic profiles of your customers, for instance, based on age or sex or income? How do you do things differently for those? So, for instance, there's a number of options you can do. You can vote on more than one. Do you have, for instance, a VIP line for high-spending customers? Do you route calls to different advisors based on age, sex, or income? Do you play different IVR messages to different people? Do you offer a choice of different channels for different groups? Or do you not use that at all? I think this is going to be absolutely fascinating to see which of these options do you provide in terms of different demographic profiles for your customers, or is that just something you don't particularly do within the contact center? I think most of you have voted here now, so I'll just share the results up on the screen. This is interesting, Neil. Perhaps no surprises that 2/3 of the audience don't do anything different based on age, sex, or income or demographics. About 13% of customers have a VIP line, and a number of people have different channel choices, where that's the customer selects. Are you surprised by that?
No, not in the least. I mean, it's the perfect segue to my next point. But yeah, we see that pretty much all the time, unfortunately, and I'm sure as the answers reveal, and we can relate to that in our own experiences working with brands. And it's a challenge because, frankly, we all really expect more, and I think that's really where my next point sort of leads us to. If I can get my mouse working, here we go. In terms of looking at both sides of the equation in the spirit of customer service, so we have this wide demographic of people. Obviously, it applies, as I say, to our customer base, of course, and naturally our employed agent population. Depending on what market segment you're in, you might have a much wider diverse of customers on the left-hand side. But we know that 75% of our agent workforce is most likely under 35. But rarely are they interconnected other than some basic routing and rules based on possibly IVR choice or product type at the very least. And we have the situation where, you know, the routing and connection of said customer to agent has really been largely unchanged for many years. But the reality is the external challenges of the customer base has changed quite a lot. So customers will inevitably be a mixture of emotions, as Sandra's already talked to. So depending on my particular situation, I might well be angry, I might well indeed be very happy, I might have a certain level of expectation depending on my age or situation. I might even be embarrassed at that particular point. I'm contacting the company to ask for something I'd rather be not doing. We all have different levels of urgency. If we're on the phone, typically we've decided it's a real-time requirement. Then we may indeed well be frustrated. Or of course, we might even be potentially wanting to defraud the company. And then on the contact center side, naturally, we've got all these components that unfortunately don't go away. Systems are sometimes slow and interconnected. There are always going to be surprise events. We're in one, obviously, right now. The lack of insight is something which is amazingly prevalent. I'll come back to that. And things like rekeying and adding in workarounds for process is, again, all too common. And you combine all these different requirements and then add the contact center management expectation of always looking to create a frictionless journey, make sure NPS and AHT and FCR is all maintained within the company KPIs. And you might argue how much change really can be realized. And maybe that talks to the fact that it's been like this for a long time. And if we look at the evolution of contact center technology and how that measures between the customer experience measure and the capability of the said solutions, most people still are pretty much in the middle. And I think if we did a poll, it would talk to that, where, yes, multi-channel has become available. Most brands offer at least 3 to 6 choices of engagement, but there rarely is any interconnectivity in that customer journey. If you've had a web chat in the morning and you're talking to the contact center in the afternoon, they rarely do connect. They certainly don't connect if we go into the high street or any other digital channel. Whereas, moving to the right, the concept of the single customer view, incorporating data to make real-time behaviors is something which we're a big advocate for, and ultimately getting all the way to the right to this channel-less concept where we don't really care, to be perfectly honest, what channel you've chosen. The conversation needs to flow and be seamless, and we're using predictive tools fueled by AI to an extent, but also using speech tools to start to understand, well, what's my state of mind, what is my emotional likely situation, and then how do I apply a prioritization, a particular individual, a set of processes or empowerment to that particular given situation. And there's no question, I'm sure we'd all agree that personalization is gone higher and higher and higher up the expectation list. And all my friends and family would unanimously agree that whoever they are, whatever age or situation, now expect more of their brand. They don't want to have to repeat themselves over and over again. If you're calling back the second or third time in a single day, why are you going through the same process? Surely they should know then I'm calling for the same problem and route me at an exponential rate, maybe to the same advisor or whatever the case may be. But still, that really is that evident. So if we look at how do we apply that context and where will new meet tradition, and we've got still two sides of the equation, and the insights really need to be looked at to a greater degree. We want to capture the intent. So if I am calling for the third time this week, and I have an open fault for my broadband outage, then there's a 95% assumption and a probability as the ticket's still open that I'm calling about that same problem. So don't route me in the same way. Fast track me to an agent that's empowered to potentially go further with the problem resolution. My customer journey. If I'm a new customer or an old customer or a high value or low value, make that available real time to the agent and give them more potential empowerment to act upon that. Use the predictability of data to make decisions. If you haven't heard from me for a while, then what could I be calling about? Have I just received a bill, or am I due an upgrade, or whatever the scenario might be? It won't always be 100% accurate, but we can get much better at making some predictability decisions to make outcome decisions. AI has certainly been most prevalent around omnibots and chatbots over the last couple of years, and we've had mixed results of how effective they've been. Personal experience, I've seen some great examples of it where I've got simple inquiries, which obviously can be handled through some fairly data knowledge-driven processes. But when I get a little bit more in depth to my process, it quickly runs out of answers and rarely connects me then to a live agent with any of the context that's proceeded on the chat. And that's where things then fall down. So keeping that connectivity is absolutely key. And ultimately, the agent and the business wants to know who I am, why I'm calling, what I want, when I need it, and where I am ultimately. And in doing so, we can make some very sophisticated adjustments, although quite subtle to the consumer, to make some of these things become very, very possible. And by definition, then, from the contact center's point of view, start to introduce some of the benefits you see listed right here, which I think from a customer service and that whole measure point of view, the consumer has a much more pleasurable experience. They're often surprised by the insight that they've got, and they actually make a joke that potentially, oh, how did you know that? And I can't believe I'm talking to you again because I talked to you this morning. Those sort of things become possible, and that obviously exceeds many expectations. And talking of expectations, there's no question that brands like Amazon and Apple, from a retail engagement particularly, have really raised the bar, and as such, all consumers have sort of moved to set that as the benchmark, and we all have to sort of aspire to that kind of way of working in that customer engagement, be it in person in a store or online in an app, digital or phone-based communication. And ultimately, that's where that is certainly driving all of us to do better, and I absolutely welcome that. And then to sort of conclude, we did a bit of a straw poll a couple of months back when we were able to, and I just wanted to get a bit of a sense check to where, at the time when I was presenting this to a live audience, as to did they concur? Am I right or wrong, or can they name any particular brands that did this well? And unfortunately, the rather disappointing results, although not entirely surprising, was that nobody could really name a service or a brand that did this in this exact way. So there is a huge opportunity for all of you, I think, to differentiate in your particular marketplace by making some subtle adjustments, using some AI tools and some speech tools in many cases to achieve this sort of this possibility and this outcome. And to conclude, it'd be remiss of me if I didn't explain why Odigo do that. So, for us, it is all about, as I said at the start, using technology to the most appropriate and practical way. And I think giving agents, particularly in a very stressful environment, which they are now, more insight and understanding of who I am, what mood I'm in, why I'm calling, what my customer journey has been so far, incorporating that in a single agent view, giving them proactive tools and empowerment to handle that inquiry will both improve their productivity, likely keep them in the seat longer, lower their own attrition, and from a customer's perspective, exceed expectation by delighting and overachieving on what potentially we've got used to happening, which is repeated customer inquiries, repetition, and no personalization. So that's all I wanted to say on the topic. Thanks for your attention. I'll hand back to Jonty.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much indeed for that, Neil. Some great advice there. Just like to run a quick poll. Would you like to see a demonstration of the Odigo solution? If you if you'd like to just pop that into the box there, and I'm sure Neil would be more than happy to arrange that for you. We're now going to jump across to the chat room, and we've got time for a couple of tips and a couple of question from the audience. So let's just put the first tip in. Vicky said, using words like "I understand," "I'm here to help you," and "tone" is the best advice to give our agents. Sandra, I like that.
Yeah, sounds really great, a really good start. I also would encourage guys to know the reason why certain things have been set in policy. If they're able to explain that, sometimes that gives customers a little extra sense of reassurance.
Indeed. There's a question from Crystal, who says, can empathy sometimes be positive? If someone is laughing, can you empathize with them by relating to how they feel and showing that? I mean, Sandra, I don't know if you've got a view on this, but actually, to some extent, rapport is sort of almost matching emotion, isn't it?
It's exactly that. So empathy is literally relating to someone in whichever guise So we build rapport with people. We set off a bunch of mirror neurons. Actually, I haven't learned enough about that to talk about that. But it is both positive and negative, because people are both positive and negative. It's wherever you feel comfortable. If you feel that that will be warmly responded to, then yeah, sure, sounds great.
Excellent. Well, we've got a tip in from Cindy. Neil, I think you'd agree with this one. If you provide good experience for the customer in their efforts to reach you, to reach your agent, it will greatly help the situation. Often agents faced with apologizing for customers about their problems with the system prior to addressing the problems. So I'm guessing, you know, getting stuck in the IVR and so on, make the entire experience better.
Yeah, well, I think we judge a brand from the minute we engage, and that is the first response on the IVR through to the survey you might take at the end of the call. And every interaction is an opportunity to exceed expectation and judge. And yeah, I think one of my pet hates is just bear with me, my system's running slow today, or I don't have access to that information. You know, we've heard it 100 times. Frankly, it's unacceptable today with the technology at stand. So absolutely. Never assume that the basics are good enough.
Indeed. Well, that's all we've got time for today. So let's have a look at the winning tip. The winning tip comes in from Susan. Said we've provided pedometers for our agents. I guess that's fitness trackers, and encouraging a weekly step challenge to help with their wellness and stress along with a little healthy competition. I guess if you sat down most of the day, encouraging people to get out, and that's certainly having a league table could be quite a good one of that.
Healthy gamification, quite.
Yeah, which is really good. So we've got a little survey, if you'd just like to put that as you go through. We've got the replay available probably in about an hour's time. And just like to say thank you to our speakers. It's been a great webinar, lots of people attending. Thank you to Sandra Thompson.
Thank you, it's been a pleasure.
And wonderful, and thank you to Neil from Odigo. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, John T. You're very welcome. Well, we're back looking at QA next week. So until then, take care, stay safe, be kind. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.